Yo, what is up, everyone? Baser here, back in another video, and I know it's been a really long time since my last video. I took a huge hiatus off YouTube, but this time with Wuthering Waves, I plan on going making a full comeback. So today we are going to be covering a tier list of every 5-star character in the game. Just for full disclosure, I haven't had a chance to play CBT2, but I looked over everyone's kit after playing Genshin Impact for 3 years, pretty much uh probably more, 3 4 years, 3.5 years at this point. So yeah, so I did a lot of research. If you guys don't know, I've been streaming, literally learning more about this game every time on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/razorninjas. Link will be in the description. And yeah, so without further ado, we are going to cover every 5-star on here, with the exception of 2 characters at the start, because we know they're getting buffed post launch, and that is going to be Lan Ying and Jian Shen. So the problem with these 2 characters is that for Lan Ying, the problem that he had was that generally hitboxing. So when you go, a lot of his kit revolves around him doing base attacks while also like jumping up in the air all over the place. Problem is that you would just miss a lot of enemies, so you wouldn't really do damage. Plus, I think it was like pretty clunky to use, all things considered. So, in response, generally referred to in CBT2 as like one of the worst characters in the game. But Kuro already announced that they're gonna basically be buffing him, so it's not going to be that big of an issue, hopefully. And then the other character is Jianshin. So the problem with Jianshin is mainly 2 things. One, her forte skill, which is basically a mechanic that every character has that stacks when they do certain actions, and they get like a basic enhanced ability. So in Jianshin's case, she would basically go in this like stance where she'd kind of sit still and do nothing, and then she would like counter attacks if enemies hit her and deal damage. And then the longer she held this down, the more benefit she would get, dealing more damage, getting a shield, healing herself, pretty much. So the 2 problems with that is that it was really slow. So it relies on enemies doing stuff to you do. So you, like, a lot of times you weren't really doing anything and you're just wasting time to get a shield. It's like ridiculously slow. And the second problem is that charging this bar to activate this ability was really slow, because the main way you're doing this is, again, her skill also relies on her getting hit. So you kind of just like waiting, and then you're just doing basic attacks. So you're not really doing anything. You're not being proactive. So she's just like a huge DPS loss most of the time, despite being like a pseudo DPS style character. So it made her like really clunky, all things considered. On top of the fact that she has a ult that crowd controls, but Yang Yang, sorry, does crowd control Wing way better, and we'll get to her. And even having a cheaper ult. So yeah, Yang. Hopefully they'll end up giving her more buffs and making it so that maybe you can charge the forte when you're off field or something, or do your forte when you're off field. That'd make her a lot better. But otherwise, we'll hear more about her later, hopefully. So check back the channel. Hopefully I'll make a new video on her. Wuthering Waves launch. We plan on getting every character at launch, so we're gonna be probably wailing a lot. So stay tuned for that, I guess. All right, so moving on to the D category, we have 1 character in this category, and that character is going to be Tauchi. Unfortunately, this character is just not very good. She has a very awkward split scaling problem, unlike another character who we'll talk in a little bit later. So her intro attack scales off attack, but everything else, and everything besides the basic, scales off defense. So it just creates this really awkward scenario. And she has this sort of Beto-ish style kit where it's like she's supposed to get hit and she does things. But the problem is she generates a shield, but it's so slow and so far in your rotation, it's just not that worth it. One decent thing she has is that she has an outro skill. So to explain for people with no idea, by the way, outro skills are, you basically have another meter besides your ult, besides your forte, called Concerto. And when the Concerto bar fills up, when you swatch characters, you're allowed to do an outro skill, and then the character you're swapping into will be allowed to do an intro skill. So for Tauchi, this outro skill pretty much buffs elemental skill damage effectively. It's called like resonance skill or whatever. I don't know. It's called something different. But it's basically your elemental skill, and it's actually pretty decent for Danjin. The problem is that in order to get that, you have to get your Concerta bar full, which is not that good because you don't really want to be on her for a long period of time at all because she's just going to be a huge DPS loss. And that's like the reason I think Danjin teams will end up coming up with something else besides her right now. I just don't think she's that good enough. And that's why she's going to be in D tier. So moving on, that's the only character I'm going to be putting in D tier. For C tier, the first character we are going to be putting in is Chixia. So the problem with Chixia is generally a lot. Her main portion of kit revolves around dealing damage by staying on the field for long periods of time, holding one attack. The problem with that is you really can't dodge while you're doing this, otherwise you lose a lot of damage because that's the whole point. She fires her guns off, and when she deals 30 bullets, she basically does like a lot more damage. And that's basically like her big problem is that you're kind of like vulnerable while you're in that sort of state because you can still like move around a bit, but you can't really dodge, you can't really sprint. You're kind of just stuck there. And so bosses are not going to give you that big window of opportunity, very likely to be able to do something like that. So it's just not as very useful for this character. But she is free, so that's like her one grace point, I guess. Moving on to the next C tier character, and that's Alto. So Alto is kind of weird and not very useful right now. And the reason why he's not very useful is like he's sort of like a main DPS, and you don't really need him right now because he's a little bit like Ningguang, where he kind of makes like a shield and he has a taunt, but like, or not shield, like a gate, like, and a taunt on a skill, and then the gate on the ult, and like the gate like does damage if it passes through it. If you played Yingguang, this is almost like her, except he can move slightly bit faster, like Mona, I guess. And that's like his only thing. His outro skill buffs arrow damage, but as you see here, there are only three other arrow characters, and they're not nearly as godly to put him in like the better part. And the main reason why I say this is that while Jian will be an arrow character, he does not have good synergy with Jian because there's literally a better character, and that's Morpheum. We'll cover him a lot later in this video. So yeah, anyways, Alto, not very good. Only gimmick is that he moves fast. But really, you don't really care about moving fast. It's not really a huge thing. So yeah, I think that should be all the characters in C tier. Moving on to B tier, we have Yuanwu. So Yuanwu, I got this character wrong a lot of the time until just recently because a lot of the data is kind of weird right now. But Yuanwu is very similar to Taochi in that he's a somewhat split scaling character. However, for some stupid reason, the devs decided to give him his intro attack defense scaling, and then everything besides the base attack scales off defense. For whatever dumb reason, he's just a lot better at like dealing damage despite being a defense scaler, which makes him way more useful. And I believe he's one of the main characters that like increases stagger for enemies, so maybe that'll come up a lot more often for bosses to be able to like basically down them faster. So by that portion alone, he's going to be pretty good. He is also another free character you get. You get him after clearing essentially the third floor of Spiral Abyss MOC. It's the tower sort of mode in this game. So he's going to be one of the free characters you get. There's like out of the 6. So relatively solid character. If you don't have the Sephiroth Kalcharo guy right here, then he will be technically your next best DPS option for what's her name? For Yin Yin, sorry. And then good thing to point out about the Yuanwu is that Yuanwu really, really shines if you're able to constantly get his intro skill out. Ideally, you should be able. So ideally, when you swap into him, make sure your character you're swapping into has filled the Concerto bar, because he will actually be able to start doing really good damage. Then his base attacks will start dealing based off defense. Otherwise, they'll go based off attack. So I highly recommend that if you swap into him, just make sure you have Concerto bar filled up. All right, I said that way more than enough I should have about him. Anyways, next character I'm going to be talking about, Yang Yang. Yang Yang in B tier. I think this character is actually a really good investment early game. Really, really good. Even if you're a whale. The reason why I say this is because when you're gonna be doing a lot of echo farming early on, and Yang Yang being able to group all these small bobs and grab all the echoes together is gonna be super broken. Both of her abilities can crowd control, and she has one of the cheapest ults of the game at 100. So I think only shared between like 2 other characters. It's kind of insane, but really, really good character to farm with. Very fast, very efficient farming. Definitely really solid character. The only reason why I'm putting her in B tier is because the crowd control in endgame when it comes to killing bosses is not really huge. Um, so it just doesn't really do too much. One other thing that that's really good though is her outro ability, which is basically like a free battery for the team or for the next character, I think. So it is just really a solid character overall. No complaints. Really, really good. Definitely a lot better than these other two poopers right here. So, and then one last character I want to put in B would be Baiji. I think Baiji, she's kind of like Barbara in my opinion, with like kind of like she has like a slight attack buff, like a Guoba like Chili if you play Genshin Impact, and a damage buff on the outro skill. But you really don't want to farm Concerto too much on this character because again, huge DPS loss. You're not going to be doing a lot of damage. Base attacks scale off attack, but she does have some slight damage increasing abilities. And they scale off HP, but her cooldowns are really large, so it doesn't justify really the long period of time you're going to be playing with her on field. But I think for early game, if you just want to go comfy and have a nice healer, she is one of the free characters. That you get through the story. Will be a decently solid character. And if you plan on playing her with Sanhua, who's another free character you get, who's like a sort of Ayaka-like character, she's nice because if you do manage to get whale copies the C6 version of this character, then she does boost the ice damage. So it could have some good, decent synergies down the line. But otherwise, mediocre character, to be honest. Unless you're playing like a SU type mode or overworld, she's not really that good in those other modes. Okay, cool, sweet. So with that done out of the way, those are pretty much all like the mid-tier characters. Now we're going on to the really good ones. So starting off at A tier, we have the MC. In this case, I'm referring to Spectre. There has been a rumored, or I guess, Havoc version, the Dark MC, but I think the Spectre one, the light version, is way better in comparison. So the reason why the Spectre MC is actually really good, it's not because of any like future thing or anything like that. It's mainly because the MC is technically another sustain at C4, Constellation 4, E4, whatever you refer to, coming from Genshin Impact, HSR, whatever. The MC has a slight healing ability, so it's basically a pseudo sustain for the team. As well as that, they have really cheap rotations, really easy skill, really easy ult, very fast, very quick. And their Concerto, their outro skill, basically pauses time for like a couple seconds, so it allows you to basically start doing some pretty good openings for dealing damage. Just really, really solid character. Not much to say. I don't think I would use the dark version unless you're playing with maybe a Donjin team. Even then, that version feels very sus. So, but Spectre MC, really, really good. No complaints with them. The next character I would be putting here will be Sanhua. Sanhua, by far the best pure free-to-play friendly character, assuming you're not doing any rolls. No gacha required to get her. You literally have to spend 5 days logging in. That's pretty much it. But my God, she is by far the best character DPSing. She's basically sort of like a pseudo Ayaka. Does some charge attacks. Has a really good outro ability, which buffs basic attacks for characters. Really good for Kalcharo if you want to play him. Really good for Encore. Really, really solid character. And if you want to, you can give her the 5-star sword you'll get for free at AR45 or whatever they call it. Again, really, really solid DPS. Really, really solid sub DPS. Really decent support. Just amazing. By far, again, the best free character we're gonna get. I bet maybe besides Rover, if you count all the future versions of Rover. But yeah, so that will be Sanhua right here. The next character is gonna be Jian. So Jian is like Xiao if Xiao had a little bit of crowd controlling. If like Venti and Xiao got together or something. So Jian is like a pseudo DPS who mostly relies on his ult, kind of like Xiao, to basically boost him. But instead of plunge attacks, like you may be familiar with Xiao, he does charge attacks. And that actually is really, really good for a future character we're going to be talking about a little bit later on. But yeah, he just does really good damage, and as well as does a little bit of crowd control on them. But the problem with Jian over other DPS characters on this list is that he doesn't really do as much single target oriented damage because it's all spread out over multiple enemies. And so I think that's what kind of like ranks him down in this list a little bit more than a lot of the other 5-stars, which we'll talk later, that are really good at generally boss clearing. And that the fact that a majority of the end game content is going to be centered around bossing. And even then, I think kind of Yang Yang might be a little bit better for Overworld. This is just my personal preference. But again, Jian, really, really solid character. And ironically, I would highly recommend you roll on his banner, but not for him, as we've been discussing the other 4 stars, which will actually be on his banner. Starting off with the first one now, we have Danjin. Yes, Danjin, assuming she doesn't get any changes before release, Danjin is a really good DPS. If you consider her, she's sort of like Hu Tao, except if Hu Tao continuously lost HP. So she's a very high risk, high reward character. So if you're good at not, if you're really really skilled player and good at not getting hit, she is really really good. If you plan on doing like the challenge content, if you need one solo 4 star. Other than that, she might need a sustain, in which she'd probably want to run the Baiji instead. You could run Tao Chi, but Tao Chi is really slow, like I mentioned before, and not that good. Another little bit slight downside to Danjin right now is that her outro skill buffs havoc damage, but besides Tao Chi, that really, and they have the MC coming up later, but besides Tao Chi at launch, you're not going to have another havoc character, so her outro skills borderline useless, and you're going to get it off a lot of the time, unfortunately. So that's like another downside I do have to give her. But otherwise, again, another character you can give the 5-star sword on. That weapon's like crazy. It's like Skyward Harp at Genshin Impact's launch, which was by far the best weapon then. But yeah, just really, really solid character. By far best 4-star DPS in general. The only problem is that she is not free. You do have to get her, but she is going to be rated up on Jian's banner, which is the very first banner in the game. So it just turns out, really relatively easier to get her than other 4-stars on this list. So yeah. And then I think we have one more 4-star, one more character in the A tier, and that is going to be Encore. I'm putting Encore a little bit higher up for general. We're not considering like the highest skill cap or whatever, but Encore, really, really solid DPS. Just pretty much kind of just basic attack, spamming, use skills, just juggle some skills in there. And then she has like a final, her ult basically will enhance her abilities. And then finally, her forte skill kind of just does a big boom. And then her outro skill will also deal a big boom. Just really good damage. Really, really good at dealing a lot of dead hits. And it, ironically, is a relatively tanky character. So I just think relatively solid DPS. Not much I can say. Pretty good at wiping bosses. For that reason alone, just A tier. I will say, though, that longevity-wise, I'm not sure how good Encore is going to scale. So I would be a little bit wary. My honest opinion is that I don't think any of the 5-stars are worth like dedicating rerolls for, honestly. If there is a selector at the beginning of the game, we'll pick one of the other 5-stars, which I'll discover later in my S tier category. But Encore, as far as launch goes, she's going to be a relatively solid character. Does also have really good synergy with Sanhua as well, which is going to be free. So free to play friendly, I would say, if you get her as a 5-star. Okay, cool. So now that is all of the A tier characters. Now we will move on to pretty much the four best characters in the game. Starting off at the worst character in S tier, we have Calcharo. And the reason why I'm saying he's the worst out of the S tier is because he's going to scale horribly, just like Diluc did at launch of Genshin Impact. So he's basically a big, heavy focused DPS character who's actually very similar to Diluc, and that he kind of likes to alternate between skills and basics. And he's just a basic attack spammer when all things are said and done. Just solid character, does a lot of damage. Not much to say. Outro skill will just pretty much deal more damage. So nothing too specific, just somehow the best at dealing damage right now, given what we have. So again, I think he's going to get power crept pretty damn easily. But that being said, he's still really good. So I put him in S tier for now. Just be warned that I wouldn't dedicate to super investing in him because he's good right now. Like, I feel like within a couple months he could be well into A tier or even B tier, given how much Kuro Games wants to power creep. Okay, cool. So the next character on this list will be Verena. Verena, really good healer. If you had to pick one 5-star, I would honestly, long term, I may actually pick Calcharo if I actually want to get damage, but I don't think healing will be as important. But Verena's still really good. Pretty generic buffer, good healer. She kind of heals like Chi-Chi a lot of the time, where she marks enemies and you hit them, you get healing. But the main part that everyone likes to go like, wow, Pog, about her is that she can kind of spam her skill and you get an attack buff. You get basically no Noblesse Oblige type buff. and then the outro skill will give a damage bonus, which is like okay, it's a 15% damage bonus. That being said, I'm not sure how good it's going to be to try to farm Concerto. She does have a way to cheat out Concerto for her outro skill, but I'm a little bit iffy on it, and I think this character could arguably be power crept later on. Relatively straightforward. I don't think she's nearly as good as people think she is, but yeah, this is just my opinion. Still relatively really good character right now. I don't think it's bad for you to get her if you do get her off. If there's a selector out there to get her, but I don't think she's gonna like I don't think you need to pull her to be able to clear content at all. I think that's crazy. So yeah, that is Verena. Next is going to be Yin Yin. I know everyone's saving for this character, but hear me out. Hear me out first. Okay, if you roll for this character, please, this sounds crazy, but it's because the 4-stars are so good on Jian's banner. You might want to do a couple pulls on Jian's banner just so you can get the 4-stars. At least one copy of her, of Danjin, and one copy of Mortefi. Please, just do it. These characters are not free. You're not able to get them through any other means right now, but they are rate up, so try to get one of each. I know this sounds crazy, but they are by far going to make your account way better in the long term. But that being said, Yin Yin is kind of like Yai Miko and Fischl. She's kind of an Electro sub DPS, but she does have some on-field requirements, essentially, which is basically going to be normal attack spamming so you can get your marks, which will deal damage, and get your enhanced marks. And then you swap to another character, they'll, do extra things. Her ult is almost exactly like Yai Miko's in that it does, like, extra hits on the field at a specific area. And so, but the problem, I have a little bit of a problem with her right now. It's just the fact that if you don't have Calcharo, it's kind of iffy. You do have Yuanwu because her outro skill buffs, it's a half electro damage, lightning damage, and half liberation damage, which is your ult or your elemental burst stuff. So it's kind of weird because Calcharo by far is the one that benefits the most from this, but Yuan Wu is solid if you're able to consistently get the outro skill for Yin Yin. So I think she's really, really good, but you do want to get your Illyrio-looking middle-aged man guy leveled up for her in advance if you do want her. That being said, I think there's 2 other 4-stars on her banner, which are Alto, which I put down here, and it's Taochi. So like literally 2 of the worst 4-stars versus 2 of the best 5-star or 4-stars. Not hard to figure why I put her, like why I'm telling you guys like right now. You kind of want to roll for Jian's banner just for the 4-stars. Pity should carry over, hopefully, unless they do anything crazy. But yeah. That being said, that's my opinion on Yin Yin. Really, really decent sub DPS. I think she'll scale pretty well into the future. Decent weapon. Yada yada yada. All right, last character we have is Mortefi. I think Mortefi is the best character right now in the game. Maybe I'm overrating it too much, but I think this character is crazy. This character is also a 4-star, by the way. So this character is the Shanling Xingqiu of this game. So the main thing about this character is that their ult. So their ult is just like Xingqiu, create swords. Every time you do a normal attack, it does damage. Every time you do a charge attack, it also does damage. Actually does a little bit more damage, or heavy attack. And if you have his Constellation Eidolon 1 or whatever, your skill also does damage. Same damage as the heavy attack. So it's really, really good now all of a sudden for Danjin, if you use her. And then finally, the other part of his kit, the outro skill, increases heavy attack damage. So it turns out there's a good amount of characters who use heavy attacks, even though they don't explicitly say heavy attacks as much. Calcharo, pretty good heavy attack character a lot of the time. Sanhua, pretty good heavy attack character. You will be using heavy attacks on Danjin just because it heals her, so you will be using heavy attacks on her. Occasionally, you'll be doing a heavy attack on Encore with her like ability. It's not as good, but it comes up. But you'll also be doing a lot of base attacks, so Mortefi will just doing a lot of damage. We could keep going with this. Generally, Mortefi, just really, really good. On top of that, his passive allows his bullets to scale, so they'll do more and more damage as it ramps up. Really, really good off-fielder. Really, really good. He's a 4-star. He has another one. His 4th Constellation, 4th Eidolon, allows him to basically have 70% higher uptime on his ult, so dealing even more sub DPS damage, dealing more damage, and finally his last Eidolon Constellation will allow him to give like basically a Noblesse Oblige style buff, a 20% attack buff for like 20 seconds to the entire team. Just so good. Oh, and by the way, Mortefi, he has really good synergy with GN. By far better than Alto, because Alto only provides you like a 28 or something arrow damage bonus. Meanwhile, Mortefi offers you a 38% damage bonus on heavy attacks, which is really good for GN, because GN's all of his damage, especially when he uses his ult, is going to be heavy attack damage. Really good. And that is the reason why he is going to be on GN's banner. Guaranteed, they will never change this, because he has really good synergy with the on-banner unit. He also has really good synergy with Danjin, which is why I'm pretty sure why they're putting him in. But he also has really good synergy with Sanhua, who's also going to be a free character. So overall, character works very good for free-to-play, very good for whales that tend to play on day one. Just crazy character, really easy to build too. There's going to be like a version of the Favonius series of weapons. Maybe I'll cover that in another video when it comes to maybe talking about weapons. But yeah, really good character. By far, best character in the game right now. Really easy to get. Free-to-play wise, whale wise, I think everyone's going to be running him for that reason alone. And yeah, so that is going to be the video, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys are interested in maybe talking about team building or weapon build, or maybe Echo advice, please let me know in the comments which one I should cover first. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.